Ladies and gentlemen, success is not a lottery ticket. It is not a random event or something that just happens to a select few. And despite what social media may portray, it is not the result of luck. What we know, through decades of research in neuroscience, psychology, and human performance, is that success is built. It is constructed through consistent, directed effort. In fact, there are very specific mechanisms in the brain and body, dopamine systems, neuroplasticity, stress adaptation, that are activated not by luck, but by deliberate hard work. When you wake up early, when you train your focus, when you repeat a skill, even when it's uncomfortable, that's not just motivation, that's biology. You are literally rewiring your brain to become capable of more. Every ounce of effort you invest is a signal to your nervous system to grow, to adapt, and to push forward. So today, we are not going to talk about wishing or waiting. We are going to talk about how success is earned step by step, choice by choice, through discipline, effort, and the science of hard work. Effort activates neuroplasticity. The brain changes through hard work, not chance. This concept is foundational in the field of neuroscience and underpins why consistent effort leads to long-term success. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change and adapt as a result of experience. It's how we form habits, develop new skills, overcome challenges, and essentially shape who we become. But what is often misunderstood is that this adaptability doesn't get activated automatically. It doesn't respond to passivity or luck. It gets triggered by focused, repetitive effort. When we engage in a challenging task, whether it's practicing a new skill, studying something complex, or pushing through physical training, specific circuits in the brain start to light up. These circuits include neurons and synapses that communicate with each other, and through repeated activation, they begin to form stronger connections. This is often summarized by the phrase, neurons that fire together wire together. In other words, the more we practice something with deliberate effort, the more those neural pathways become efficient and the task becomes easier over time. This is the neurological foundation of learning and mastery. But here's the key point: without effort, these changes don't occur. The brain is energy efficient and will not waste metabolic resources reinforcing pathways that aren't being used. This means that simply hoping for success or being in the right place at the right time will not rewire your brain. You can be exposed to opportunity, but if you're not engaging actively with your environment, putting in the work, your brain doesn't adapt in a meaningful way. It's the effort that signals the brain this is important. Invest here. This has been proven through countless studies, particularly in the areas of skill acquisition and recovery. For example, stroke patients who engage in physical therapy involving focused repetition show dramatic improvement in regaining lost functions. The same applies to people learning a musical instrument or a new language. The rate of progress correlates strongly with how much deliberate, focused effort they put in. Passive exposure, like hearing a language or watching someone play guitar, does not lead to meaningful change unless it is paired with personal engagement and challenge. Effort is also tied to the release of neurochemicals such as acetylcholine and norepinephrine. These chemicals help enhance attention and focus, and they support the plasticity process. When you are putting in hard work, especially when it feels slightly outside your comfort zone, these neurochemicals flood your system, allowing the brain to encode new patterns more deeply. This is why the discomfort of pushing your limits is actually a sign that learning is taking place. If it feels easy all the time, your brain is probably not changing much. Furthermore, the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning, decision-making, and goal setting, becomes more active during challenging effort. Over time, with repeated activation, this part of the brain strengthens, giving you more willpower, better focus, and greater executive control. This isn't motivational fluff, it's hard neuroscience. The act of engaging in effort literally builds the very systems you need to become more disciplined and successful. People often look at high performers and assume they're simply gifted or lucky. But what isn't visible are the thousands of hours of effort that preceded the results. Luck may give someone an initial platform, but it's effort that determines who remains and thrives. In fact, those who rely on luck without effort tend to fall off quickly because their brain hasn't been prepared to handle sustained challenge, stress, or competition. Their internal systems haven't been built for longevity. The good news is that neuroplasticity is available to everyone. It doesn't require perfect genetics or a privileged background. What it demands is effort. The more you apply yourself, especially in targeted, uncomfortable, focused ways, the more your brain adapts and the more capable you become. And this compounds over time. Every bit of effort builds on the last, creating a snowball effect of capability, confidence, and momentum. So when you work hard, you're not just checking boxes or grinding through the day. You are literally shaping your brain into one that is better at problem solving, more resilient under pressure, and more prepared to achieve long-term goals. You are becoming the kind of person who not only reaches success, but sustains it, builds on it, and multiplies it. That transformation doesn't come from luck. It comes from the biological, mental, and emotional remodeling triggered by effort. Hard work, when done with intention and consistency, is not just the path to success. It's the engine that makes success possible in the first place. Consistent action triggers dopamine release, building sustained motivation. This idea is crucial for understanding how we maintain momentum in the pursuit of success. Dopamine is often misunderstood as simply the pleasure chemical of the brain, but its primary function is actually about motivation, drive, and anticipation of reward. It's what fuels us to keep going, especially when the outcomes of our actions are not immediate. And what research shows is that the brain doesn't release dopamine only when we achieve something. It often releases dopamine during the pursuit of a goal, especially when we engage in consistent, intentional effort. When we take small, repeated actions toward a meaningful objective, dopamine gets released in the brain's reward circuitry, particularly in regions like the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area. This chemical signal creates a sense of forward momentum. It reinforces the behavior, making us more likely to repeat it. In essence, the brain starts to link effort with reward. The more consistent we are, the stronger this association becomes, and over time, we begin to feel good not just when we achieve something, but while we're working toward it. This is incredibly important because many people give up on their goals too early. Thinking motivation is supposed to be automatic, but motivation isn't something that shows up first and then leads to action. It's the reverse. It's the action that leads to motivation. Dopamine gets released when we initiate movement, when we stick to our schedule, when we check off tasks, even small ones. And as this continues, our brain begins to expect reward from the process itself. That's when sustained motivation takes hold. Consider how habits are formed. The first time you do something difficult, like going to the gym after a long break or sitting down to write when you don't feel like it, there's resistance. But as you push through and do it anyway, the brain starts releasing small bursts of dopamine in response to the effort. If you repeat this consistently, your brain starts to anticipate those rewards even before the task is complete. This anticipation is what drives you forward. Over time, the process becomes less about forcing yourself and more about feeling drawn toward the action because it feels good to make progress. What's even more powerful is that the brain starts to develop a feedback loop. When consistent effort is paired with small wins, even things like completing a set of tasks, solving a problem, or getting a step closer to a goal, dopamine release increases, reinforcing the value of persistence. This is why successful people often become more motivated the deeper they go into their work. It's not that they started with an infinite reserve of energy or passion. It's that their brains adapted to the reward structure of consistent effort. Another key piece of this puzzle is how we mentally frame our goals. If we only focus on distant outcomes, like making a certain amount of money, reaching a big milestone, or earning recognition, we deprive ourselves of the dopamine that comes from short-term progress. But when we learn to attach a sense of reward to the process itself, to the daily grind, the reps, the repetitions, that's when motivation becomes resilient. The brain begins to release dopamine in response to showing up and putting in the work, regardless of how far away the final outcome is. This insight is incredibly empowering because it means you don't have to wait to feel inspired. You can train your brain to generate motivation by taking action. Even on days when you feel low energy or doubtful, simply starting a single step, a short period of focused work, can initiate the dopamine loop that drives continued progress. And this is the biology of momentum. And it's important to note that this process builds upon itself. Dopamine pathways are strengthened with repetition. The more you engage in consistent action, the more responsive your brain becomes to effort-based reward. Over time, your baseline level of motivation increases, not because life got easier, but because your nervous system learned to associate effort with satisfaction and meaning. You no longer need external validation or outcomes to feel driven. You've built an internal system that fuels itself. This is why consistent hard work outpaces talent and luck in the long run. While talent may give someone a head start and luck may open doors, neither of those can sustain effort over years. Only a brain wired to find reward in the process will keep going when the road gets long and obstacles appear. And that wiring is built through daily, consistent action, not by accident, but by design. So the path to sustained motivation is not mysterious. It's grounded in biology. Start where you are, take action, do it again tomorrow. Let your brain associate effort with purpose. With each small step, dopamine will be there, not as a reward for luck, but as a response to your determination. That's how lasting motivation is created, and that's how success is earned. Deliberate discomfort trains the mind to overcome resistance and fear. This is not just a motivational concept. It's a fundamental principle rooted in neuroscience and behavioral psychology. The human brain is wired to seek safety, predictability, and ease. That's part of our evolutionary design. In ancient times, this wiring helped our ancestors survive in dangerous environments by avoiding unnecessary risks. However, in today's world, where physical threats are rare but psychological challenges are constant, that same wiring can hold us back. It can keep us stuck in patterns of avoidance, procrastination, and self-doubt. The only way to rewire that response is through deliberate exposure to discomfort, done in a focused and purposeful way. When you intentionally place yourself in situations that are uncomfortable, such as waking up early to train, speaking in public, starting a new venture, or facing a difficult conversation, you activate the body's stress systems. Your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Your heart rate might go up, your palms may sweat, and your mind may race. These are signs that the brain is alerting you to a perceived threat. But here's the keys. The more often you face this response without retreating, the more your brain learns that discomfort does not equal danger. This process is called sexhabituation. With repeated exposure, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, starts to dial down its response. You begin to feel less overwhelmed. Your prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision making and rational thinking, becomes more engaged. This shift gives you more control over your behavior, even in the presence of fear. You're training your mind to act despite anxiety, to show up even when it's hard, and to stay composed under stress. This is how resilience is built, not through inspiration, but through repeated practice in discomfort. Deliberate discomfort is also the foundation of what neuroscientists call stress inoculation. Just as a vaccine exposes the body to a weakened form of a virus to build immunity, repeated exposure to manageable stress builds psychological toughness. You become mentally stronger not by avoiding difficulty, but by moving toward it with intention. Over time, what once seemed overwhelming becomes manageable. Your threshold for pressure expands. You begin to welcome challenge because you've taught your brain that growth lives on the other side of struggle. It's important to distinguish between harmful stress and productive discomfort. We're not talking about burnout or trauma. We're talking about voluntary experiences that push your limits in a controlled way. What researchers sometimes call high stress or positive stress. This kind of stress improves focus, enhances learning, and drives adaptation. Whether it's holding a difficult yoga pose, pushing through fatigue during a run, or speaking your mind when it's easier to stay quiet, these are moments that stretch your capacity. Each one is a signal to the brain this person is growing, and the brain responds accordingly. Neuroplasticity is heightened during periods of moderate purposeful stress. The combination of discomfort and focused attention enhances the brain's ability to form new neural connections. That's why learning happens faster in high-stakes environments. It's why athletes, soldiers, and top performers deliberately place themselves in challenging situations. They are harnessing the power of discomfort to evolve. One of the greatest benefits of this practice is the shift in identity that occurs. As you repeatedly face what you fear or resist, your self-image changes. You begin to see yourself as someone who does hard things, someone who can be trusted to show up, even when it's not easy. This internal transformation is more powerful than any external achievement. It builds a deep sense of confidence, not based on results, but on earned evidence that you can handle adversity. Fear and resistance never completely disappear. The goal is not to eliminate them, but to reframe them. To see them not as signs to stop, but as signals to begin. When discomfort shows up, it often means you're on the right path. It means you're stepping into territory where growth is possible. That discomfort becomes a compass. This mindset is essential for anyone pursuing success, because the truth is anything worthwhile will involve discomfort. There will be setbacks, long hours, uncertainty, and moments of doubt. If you've trained your mind to stay calm and focused under those conditions, you won't be thrown off course. You'll keep moving forward, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. So if you want to build a life of progress, start by building a relationship with discomfort. Seek it out in small ways every day. Embrace the cold, the silence, the early mornings, the awkward conversations, the unfamiliar tasks. Do the thing you resist. Over time, the edge becomes the center. The hard becomes normal. And the person who once avoided discomfort becomes the person who thrives in it. That's not luck. That's transformation by choice. And it's one of the most powerful tools for achieving real, lasting success. Success is a result of repeated failures processed as feedback, not failure. This distinction is essential. The way we interpret our setbacks determines whether we stagnate or grow. From a neuroscientific and psychological perspective, failure is not just an unfortunate detour on the path to success. It is a necessary part of the learning process. The human brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. It constantly makes guesses about the world, evaluates outcomes, and then adjusts its internal models based on what happens. When we fail, it's not the end of the road. It's a signal, a powerful one, that offers data for recalibration. At the core of this feedback system is a process called UU error prediction and correction ball, heavily tied to brain regions like the anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal cortex. These areas detect when outcomes don't align with expectations. In a failure moment, your brain is essentially saying, something didn't work. Let's update our strategy. But that only happens if we allow it to, if we shut down in response to failure. By quitting, avoiding, or blaming, we cut off the brain's chance to make those adjustments. The real tragedy is not in the failure itself, but in the missed opportunity to evolve. This is why a growth mindset, as proposed by psychologist Carol Dweck, is more than a motivational slogan. It's a biological necessity for improvement. People who view failure as feedback tend to engage more deeply with their tasks after setbacks. They don't retreat, they analyze, they ask, what went wrong? What can I learn? How can I improve next time? This active engagement lights up the neural pathways responsible for problem solving, memory, and cognitive flexibility. Over time, these pathways strengthen, making the individual more capable and adaptable. Contrast this with a fixed mindset where failure is interpreted as a reflection of personal inadequacy. In this state, the brain shifts into a threat response. Stress hormones like cortisol are released, emotional centers like the amygdala dominate, and executive functioning is reduced. Instead of learning, the person spirals into self-doubt or defensiveness. This is not because they lack intelligence or talent. It's because their brain has been conditioned to avoid the pain of failure rather than extract value from it. In highly successful individuals, one trait emerges repeatedly. They treat failure as neutral information. To them, each setback is just another iteration, another chance to refine their approach. This is often seen in high-performing athletes, elite military units, and top innovators. They fail often. but they fail forward. After each mistake, they conduct after action reviews, not to place blame, but to identify what needs to be corrected. Their brains become wired to see failure not as something to fear, but as something to use. The process of adapting from failure also strengthens emotional resilience. Every time you face a setback and choose to stay engaged, you build psychological toughness. You prove to yourself that you can handle difficulty and keep going. This isn't just willpower. It's biology. Your nervous system becomes more efficient at returning to baseline after stress. Your stress tolerance increases. You begin to recover faster from emotional hits, and that gives you a major advantage in high-stakes environments where others may fold. Furthermore, a failure builds pattern recognitional. Each time something doesn't work out, your brain logs the experience. Over time, you develop a mental library of what not to do, which sharpens your decision-making. This is why older, more experienced individuals often make fewer critical errors. Not because they're smarter, but because they've failed more and they've learned from it. They've built up a reserve of experiential knowledge that can't be taught, only earned. It's important that not all failure leads to growth. The key variable is reflection. If we're willing to sit with discomfort, ask hard questions, and take responsibility, then failure becomes feedback. But if we numb the experience, blame others, or avoid analysis, then the same failure will repeat itself over and over. Growth depends on how honest we are in the aftermath of a mistake, and that honesty is what unlocks change. In this way, success becomes a cumulative result of intelligent failure. It's not about being perfect. It's about failing, learning, adapting, and repeating that loop enough times that your skills, mindset, and emotional stability reach a level where success is inevitable. Every successful entrepreneur, artist, scientist, or athlete has a trail of failures behind them. Not because they were unlucky, but because they were in motion. And motion brings friction. That friction is the price of progress. So if you're failing, don't retreat. Lean in, ask yourself what the experience is trying to teach you. Take notes, reassess, adjust. This isn't the end of the path. It is all the path. And the more times you're willing to walk through failure with your eyes open, the more prepared your brain becomes to lead you toward long-term success. That's not luck. That's evolution, driven by effort, processed through feedback, and transformed into wisdom. Success is not built in a moment of brilliance, but in the discipline of repetition. This truth stands in direct contrast to the popular myth that one lucky break, a single idea, or a sudden flash of inspiration is what sets high achievers apart. In reality, those who reach the top of any field, whether it's science, sports, art, or entrepreneurship, do so because they have trained themselves to embrace repetition. They don't just do the hard work once, they do it over and over again with intention, precision, and discipline. That's where mastery is formed, not in the spectacular moments, but in the mundane ones repeated with care. From a neurological standpoint, repetition is how the brain builds efficiency. When we repeat a skill or behavior consistently, our neurons fire in specific patterns. The more often those patterns are activated, the stronger the connections between those neurons become. This process is called alarmyelination, the wrapping of nerve fibers in a fatty sheath that makes signals travel faster and more efficiently. It's this biological process that turns conscious effort into automatic execution. What was once difficult becomes natural, almost effortless, not because the task changed, but because the brain adapted through repetition. This is why elite performers can make complex tasks look easy. A gymnast doesn't execute a flawless routine because they're lucky or naturally gifted. They've repeated every single movement thousands of times. A concert pianist doesn't perform with precision because of inspiration. They've practiced until their muscles and nervous system respond without hesitation. The same principle applies in business, in leadership, in writing, in public speaking, and in personal development. Skill is not born, it is built, and repetition is the builder. But repetition alone is not enough. What matters is of deliberate repetition, doing the same things over and over, but with attention, reflection, and slight refinement each time. This is what psychologist Anders Ericsson referred to as deliberate practice. It's not about just showing up and going through the motions. It's about being present, noticing the micro errors, pushing slightly beyond your limits, and making corrections. That's how you improve. That's how the quality of your repetition compounds over time. The challenge, of course, is that repetition is rarely glamorous. It's often boring. The mind craves novelty, stimulation, excitement. So to commit to repetition requires discipline, especially when results aren't immediately visible. This is where many people fall short. They expect fast outcomes, and when they don't see progress quickly, they stop. But discipline is the force that allows you to continue even when motivation fades. It's the choice to return to the process, to do another rep, to show up on the days when no one is watching and nothing dramatic is happening. There's a phrase often used in elite military training: you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. What that means is that in high pressure situations, you won't suddenly become better than you've practiced. You'll default to your habits, your patterns, and your preparation. If your preparation has been shallow, inconsistent, or distracted, that's what will show. But if your preparation has been deep, focused, and repeated, you'll perform with calm, precision, and confidence. This is the invisible foundation of success, built through hours of repetition no one sees. Another powerful benefit of repetition is identity change. The more often you act in alignment with a certain trait, like discipline, perseverance, courage, the more your brain begins to internalize that identity. If you write every day, even for 10 minutes, your brain begins to see you as a writer. If you train regularly, your brain starts to believe you're an athlete. Repetition reinforces not just skill, but self-concept. This is why small, repeated actions can completely transform someone's life over time. It's not just about behavior, it's about becoming. Repetition also builds emotional endurance. When you show up consistently, regardless of your emotional state, you teach your nervous system that discomfort isn't a barrier. You decouple action from mood. You learn to act based on principle, not feeling. This is a cornerstone of high achievement, because if you only act when you feel good, you'll be inconsistent. But if you've trained yourself to act no matter what, you become unstoppable. And all of this takes time. Success is slow. It requires patience. It requires trust in the process. Repetition doesn't always show immediate payoff, and that's why many abandon it. But those who stay with it, who invest in repetition with faith and discipline, eventually experience a compound return. One day, the skill that felt impossible becomes second nature. The project that seemed overwhelming becomes manageable. The identity you once dreamed of becomes your reality, not through a single moment of magic, but through thousands of ordinary, repeated efforts. This is the unglamorous truth behind every extraordinary result. The people we admire most, who seem to operate at a different level, aren't living in a different world. They're living in the same world, but they've chosen a different rhythm. They've embraced the grind. They've respected the process. And through repetition, they've carved greatness into their lives, stroke by stroke, hour by hour, day by day. The ability to delay gratification is one of the most powerful predictors of long-term success. It's a principle rooted not in luck or chance, but in neuroscience and behavioral psychology. At its core, delayed gratification is the willingness to sacrifice short-term pleasure in pursuit of a greater reward in the future. It's the discipline to say, not yet, when every part of you wants to say, yes, now. This ability isn't just a nice-to-have trait. It's a foundational skill for building anything of lasting value, from health and relationships to career and financial stability. The most well-known study on this topic is the Stanford marshmallow experiment, in which children were given a choice: eat one marshmallow now or wait a short period and receive 2 marshmallows later. Researchers tracked these children for decades, and the findings were profound. Those who had the ability to wait, those who could delay gratification, consistently outperformed their peers in virtually every area of life: academic achievement, career advancement, emotional regulation, even physical health. The takeaway was clear: impulse control is a critical factor in long-term success. What's happening in the brain during these moments of decision is a tug of war between two systems. On one side, you have the limbic system, the emotional and reward center, which lights up in response to immediate pleasure. It wants the cookie now, the dopamine hit, the easy out. On the other side, particularly the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, works to evaluate long-term outcomes and inhibit impulsive behavior. The stronger and more practiced this area of the brain becomes, the better we are at managing temptation and staying aligned with our long-term goals. The ability to delay gratification is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. But just like physical muscles, it weakens without use. Every time you give in to a fleeting impulse, scrolling social media instead of working, skipping a workout, buying something unnecessary, you reinforce the habit of choosing ease over growth. Conversely, every time you resist an urge and choose what serves your future, you reinforce the identity of someone who is disciplined, focused, and in control. This skill is essential in a world designed for distraction and instant pleasure. We live in an environment engineered to hijack our attention and our impulses. Notifications, ads, fast food, binge-worthy shows, everything is structured to pull us toward now. That's why developing the capacity to delay gratification is more than a personal strength. It's a form of modern resistance. It's choosing to act on your values, not your cravings. It's choosing vision over urges. Delaying gratification doesn't mean denying yourself forever. It means being strategic with your decisions. It means understanding that real progress often involves short-term sacrifice. The person who skips the party to study isn't antisocial, they're invested in their future. The person who wakes up early to train isn't obsessive, they're committed to excellence. They've trained their mind to associate discipline with reward. Over time, this becomes a habit and eventually a lifestyle. In neuroscience, this is related to the concept of dopaminergic control. Dopamine isn't just about pleasure, it's about anticipation of reward. The key is to shift your dopamine system away from immediate gratification and toward long-term goals. When you begin to take pride in self-discipline, when you feel good about doing the hard thing, your brain starts to release dopamine, not just when you achieve the goal, but while you're on the path toward it. This is how delayed gratification becomes sustainable. It starts to feel good. You begin to crave progress more than pleasure. And this shift pays off in compounding ways. When you delay gratification in one area, say, by saving money instead of spending impulsively, you build not only financial stability, but also the self-respect that comes from being in control. That confidence spills into other areas. You start to eat better, train harder, focus longer. You become the kind of person who does what needs to be done, regardless of how you feel in the moment. That consistency, powered by delayed gratification, becomes a competitive edge in every area of life. Most people aren't unsuccessful because they lack intelligence or talent. They struggle because they haven't trained themselves to manage their impulses. They allow their short-term moods to dictate their long-term outcomes. But the moment you realize that every decision is a vote for the person you want to become, things change. Choosing to delay gratification isn't a punishment, it's an investment. It's the decision to suffer a little now so you can thrive a lot later. And with enough practice, that delay doesn't even feel like suffering anymore. It feels like purpose. It feels like strength. You begin to see temptation not as something to fear, but as an opportunity to train your willpower. Every small decision to wait, to pause, to reflect, each one adds a brick to the structure of your future success. Over time, that structure becomes a fortress of discipline, not built by luck, not built overnight, but built deliberately, one delayed impulse at a time.